Good afternoon, Madam President and Senators. As a nation, we have recently celebrated the 49th anniversary of our independence. It is both a time to celebrate and a time to be reflective. As a people, God has been faithful to us and has sustained us, both in the best of times and in the worst of times. Our forebears fought a quiet revolution for the establishment of our country. They endured much, sacrificed much, so that we can be heirs of those wonderful blessings that are ours as Bahamians. But do you and I recognize their sacrifice? Do we know their names? And are we willing to continue their work, even though trials may come our way? Psalms 33 and 12 states, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen as his heritage." As a country, we have been built on Christian values, and as policymakers, I invite you to allow these values to guide your decisions, outreach, and the laws that you enact. Reflect on how would the warriors of independence determine the work that you are doing individually, collectively, in nation building. Are there some areas that need to be rediscovered or tweaked for the best outcomes? Are there some persons who have been left behind who are critical to nation building, and how will they be re-engaged so that they can contribute fully in nation building? Psalm 22 and 28 says, "Do not remove the ancient landmark that your fathers," and I add mothers, "have built." As senators and leaders, you must determine what are some non-negotiables that will always be held in place because they make us Bahamian. Sometimes you may get pushback, but you are given the mandate to do your part to build up others and develop policies that will bless, empower, and keep our nation focused in positive, productive, goodly, and godly ways. As we reflect on independence, remember, we are the ancestors of the future, and what we do now will have an impact. Lois Ortiz. I want to encourage you to study the life of one of the independence freedom fighters so that you can learn from their life experiences. I want to encourage you to remember what is enacted by you today will have far-reaching effects tomorrow. Take time to listen and learn from nation builders of the Bahamas, both popular and the regular folks. They have a lot to teach. Remember, this is your season, so serve well and always keep the bigger picture before you. What happens in the past has implications on the present, and what is enacted today has implications on the future. Let us pray. Dear God, we give you thanks for the 49th independence anniversary of our country, the Bahamas. We thank you for the many persons who fought and sacrificed for the birth of our beloved nation. We recall the names of the many visionaries, but there are a multitude of nameless Bahamians who were a part of the independence movement. As the senators serve, help them to guard our heritage and to build faithfully on the foundation they have received. Make them strong, focused, and committed to you and to their assignment of serving our country and serving well. In the precious name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Please join in the prayer of our Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senators. Today is July 20th, 2022, afternoon session of the Senate. I would like to thank Madam Chaplain for her beautiful words of meditation and prayer. Thank you very much, Reverend Culmer. Adoption of minutes.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of the session of the Senate held on Monday, 20th of June, 2022 be adopted.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and second that the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of June, 2022 be adopted. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. The motion is carried. The minutes of the 20th of June, 2022 are hereby adopted. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign seats. Swearing in of new senators. Communications by the President. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the House of Assembly.
Message from the House of Assembly.
Bahamas number 14. Message to the Honorable the President and Honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bill and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. House of Assembly, Nassau, 6 July 2022. Patricia DeVoe, Speaker. Bahamas number 15. Message to the Honorable the President and Honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bill and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to regulate the trading of carbon credits in or from within the Bahamas. House of Assembly, Nassau, 14th July 2022. Patricia DeVoe, Speaker. Bahamas number 16. Message to the Honorable the President and Honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bill and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to amend the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. House of Assembly, Nassau, 20th July 2022. Patricia DeVoe, Speaker.
Laying of documents by the ministers.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate the following orders. The Rehabilitation of Offenders, Expunging of Records, Offenses Order 2022. The Public Finance Management Act 2021. Amendment to 4th Schedule Order 2022. The Industries Encouragement Approved Product Long Bay Enterprises Limited Order 2022. And the Industries Encouragement Approved Manufacturer Long Bay Enterprises Limited Order 2022.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
you, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate the following rules. The Health, the Health Services COVID-19 General Amendment Number 4 Rules 2022. The Health Services COVID-19 Prevention and Management of Community Spread Amendment Number 11 Rules 2022. The Bahamas National Trust Election Procedures for Elected Members of Council Bylaw 2022, and the Bahamas National Trust Preservation of National Parks Bylaws 2022.
Order that the rules be brought up. Order that the rules do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following: the Price Control General Amendment Number 8 Regulations 2022, the Price Control General Amendment Number 9 Regulations 2022, and the Bahamas Capital Regulations 2022.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following notices. The Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act Appointed Day Notice 2022, and the Public Holidays Independence Day 2022 Opening of Shops Notice 2022.
Order the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following directions. The Public Debt Management Bahamas Registered Stock Number 3, 2025, 2027, 2029, 2032, 2042, and 2052 directions 2022. The Public Debt Management Bahamas Registered Stock Number 4, 2023 directions 2022, and the Public Debt Management Bahamas Registered Stock 2023 and 2024 directions 2022.
Order the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following reports. The 10th Actuarial Valuation of the National Insurance Board of the Bahamas as at 31st December 2018. The 11th Actuarial Valuation of the National Insurance Board of the Bahamas as at 31st December 2018. The National Insurance Board 2018 Annual Report, and the National Insurance Board 2019 Annual Report.
Order the reports be brought up. Order that the reports do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate the Bahamas Development Bank Financial Statements 31st December 2020.
Order that the report be brought up. Order that the report do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Madam President. And finally, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate the Central Bank of the Bahamas 2021 Annual Report and Statement of Accounts for the year ended December 31st, 2021.
Order that the report be brought up. Order that the report do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
And none, Madam President.
Communications by ministers. Communications by senators. Questions. Answers to questions. Preparation of petitions. Appointment of select committees. Reports of committees. First reading of bills.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to regulate the trading of carbon credits in or from within the Bahamas.
Is there a seconder? Or that the document be brought up? It has been moved and second that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to regulate the trading of carbon credits in or from within the Bahamas. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the document be read for a first time.
A bill for an act to regulate the trading of carbon credits in or from within the Bahamas.
Further first reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act.
Is there a seconder? Order the document be brought up. It has been moved and second that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Order the document be read for a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act.
Further first reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes.
Is there a seconder? Order the document be brought up. It has been moved and second that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the document be read for a first time.
A bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provisions for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes.
For the first reading of bills,
There are none, Madam President.
second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Let nobody say I don't learn my lesson. Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon to our guests in the gallery. Welcome. I hope this is a enlightening day for an afternoon for you.
Senator, before you proceed,
Please.
please forgive me, guests, students. It was my intention to recognize you and to welcome you to the gallery of the Senate. I understand that you are summer students for the Parliament, and I trust that. Can you all please stand? I want the camera to be able to pick you up and to notice you for all of the hard work I know that the clerks have you doing during the summer. I thank you for taking initiative and to look for a summer job and to be productive members of the society. And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And I hope at some point I have the opportunity of taking a photo with all of you. Take care and may God bless you all. And thank you all for coming and visiting us at the Senate. Thank you so much.
Yes, and welcome.
And welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
No problem. No problem. Thank you. Madam President, I want to thank you. And today I rise to move for the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. Madam President, the passage of this bill is fulfillment of a promise in our blueprint for change. That promise is specifically to address the needs of disaster victims to return to normalcy. This amendment will shorten the number of years for those that have gone missing in events of peril. This is fundamentally important to bring finality to scores of families across the Bahamas as a result of missing family members from Hurricane Dorian and allow normalcy to return to their day-to-day lives. Madam President, in the first few days of September 2021, Hurricane Dorian ripped through the northern Bahamas as a Category 5 hurricane. 2019, my apologies. 2019, Hurricane Dorian ripped through the northern Bahamas as a Category 5 hurricane with winds up to 200 miles an hour and a huge storm surges. On September 1st, the eye of Hurricane Dorian made landfall on Abaco with maximum sustained winds of 185 miles an hour. The following day, September 2nd, the eye of Dorian moved over the eastern end of Grand Bahama Island and drifted across the island. As we know, Hurricane Dorian had a devastating impact on both islands, leaving many dead and many missing. Madam President, in debating this bill, I think it important to lay the backdrop regarding current circumstances on how a person is declared dead and in what instances can such person, if missing, be presumed dead. These are important issues to resolve for those families who have experienced missing loved ones as a result of an event of peril such as Hurricane Dorian, and to bring closure to years of grief and uncertainty. Who can declare a person dead? Well, Section 26(1) of the Coroner's Act provides for the coroner to hold an inquest to ascertain the cause and circumstances of the following events. For instance, if the coroner considers it necessary or desirably to do so, or if I, the Attorney General, so directs. The disappearance from any place of a person ordinarily resident in the Bahamas, the disappearance or from within the Bahamas of any person, an accident that caused death to a person. Once the coroner's court makes its findings under Section 34(1), it must transmit a copy of those findings to the Registrar General, who shall enter the death and particulars in the form and manner prescribed in the Births and Deaths Registration Act. Section 23 of the Births and Death Act provides that no person shall bury or cremate or cause to procure to be buried or cremated the dead body of any person or perform any religious service for the burial or cremation of such a body unless there has been granted in the case where an inquest or inquiry has been held by a coroner into the cause of death, an order in the prescribed form signed by the coroner authorizing such burial or cremation. Or, Madam President, in any case where such inquest or inquiry has not been held and where the dead body is to be buried, a certificate in prescribed form by a medical practitioner certifying the cause of death. I am unaware of any statute that authorizes an individual other than a coroner or a medical practitioner to officially make any determination that a person is dead, or to officially declare a person to be dead, or to sign a certificate as to the cause of death of any person. So, Madam President, what happens when a missing person is presumed dead? A person who is missing for 7 years can be presumed dead pursuant to Section 93 of the Evidence Act, which provides, and I quote, where any person is proved not to have been heard of for 7 years after proper inquiry made by or on behalf of those who naturally would have heard from him if he had been alive, the court shall presume until the contrary is shown that he is dead. But the court in such case shall make no presumption as to the time of his death, and the burden of proof that he died at any particular time shall be on the person who asserts it. This is the pressing question, Madam President. In circumstances of peril, where the deceased cannot be found, where the person is missing, is it equitable to cause for families to wait 7 years to be presumed dead? Or should we provide a mechanism to make this process easier and shorter? This is the underlying reason for the amendment we debate today, Madam President, specifically with respect to those missing as a result of Hurricane Dorian, and to provide closure and finality to years of grief, devastation, and lack of finality. Today we debate the Evidence Amendment Number 2, Bill 2022. This bill we debate today inserts a new Section 93A into Chapter 65, which is the Evidence Act. This new section reads, and I quote, "Presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. Where any person is proved to have disappeared in circumstances of peril, and the person has not been heard of or from for 2 years or more since the disappearance, and after proper inquiry made by or on behalf of those who naturally would have heard from him or from that person, if the person had been alive, the court shall presume, until the contrary is shown, that the person is dead, and the court in such a case may presume the time of death to be the date of the peril. For the purposes of this section, circumstances of peril includes a natural disaster such as a hurricane. As indicated, this amendment creates a presumption of death when a person has been missing for 2 years or more, having direct impact on hundreds of families where loved ones went missing after Hurricane Dorian. Madam President, we're not the first country to advance such a legislation. In fact, it has been common for jurisdictions to do so, especially after experiencing a grave event of peril that resulted in persons going missing. We have benchmarked this legislation against other jurisdictions, Madam President, who have done similar legislative action. For example, we looked at Ontario, we looked at Quebec, both having passed similar legislation after the 9/11 terrorist events, where persons were never found. And we looked at Louisiana. After Hurricanes Dorian and Rita, the state, passed similar legislation. Madam President, our bill today, much like that of Ontario, provides for the court to determine what a circumstance of peril is. We, however, made clear that a hurricane is to be considered a circumstance of peril. We did not go ahead and prescribe specific circumstances of peril for a reason, Madam President, because you cannot do so and be all-encompassing of any and every event of peril. For example, if you omit on a list of what an event of peril is included to be, an event of peril, then arguably the section would not apply in those circumstances, potentially excluding Bahamians from the framework that they were intended to be included in. These can include matters that we don't have to encounter on a day-to-day basis, such as a plane crash, such as a terrorist event, boats going missing, a tsunami. These are all examples of what could be regarded as an event of peril that if we prescribed a list in the legislation of things that we normally encounter, and we encounter something that we don't normally encounter, those Bahamians are now excluded from the determination under the legislation. We chose to allow the courts to make such a determination to eliminate the risk that the amendment wouldn't apply to an unanticipated event of peril. And that's our reasoning for doing so. Madam President, there may also be a question raised about why we chose 2 years. As indicated, one of the jurisdictions that we looked at, Ontario, doesn't have a time period at all. We did not think that appropriate, as some time period should be prescribed to ensure the person is in fact missing. We looked at benchmarks in this regard as well. And we observed, for instance, Louisiana, after Hurricane Katrina and Rita, provided a person is presumed dead after the passage of 2 years. And we thought that appropriate. We thought this was a reasonable and a fair approach, taking into consideration the circumstances. Madam President, we advanced this bill that provides for the presumption of death where a person disappears in circumstances of peril and has not been heard of or from for a period of 2 years or more as a fulfillment of our promise to the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama that will address needs of disaster victims to return to normalcy. See, Madam President, we are a government that focuses on the fulfillment of our promises. And this is evidence of that. We think this framework is the right thing to do, and we advance it to the Bahamian people. Madam President, it is a short bill, and before I conclude, I think it important to speak to the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian and some of the observations made and experiences had. In such a devastating natural disaster, it is hard to know where to start in its aftermath. There was tragedy and destruction everywhere. One entity, a singular government, could not do all that was required. I think everyone acknowledges that. And this is where embracing the assistance from international donors, from NGOs, and from citizens is vitally important. This is also why not doing so has a demoralizing, destructive, and painfully stagnating effect on the recovery. In this vein, I ask just a few simple questions. Where is the $1.77 billion pledged towards the Bahamas' recovery in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian? I state that this was merely a poorly done PR exercise. Why were international NGOs turned away by government agencies? Why was international support stymied for the recovery shortly after the hurricane? Madam President, you cannot do these types of things and effectively recover from a tragedy. I can speak to it firsthand, and specifically to the services of NGOs in the recovery from tragic events such as Hurricane Dorian. See, Madam President, I was on the ground in Abaco within a week after the hurricane, volunteering for BARC, for the Bahamas Alliance for Animal Rights and Kindness, assisting the animal population of Abaco and assisting the residents of Abaco who were animal owners. This is what I chose to do in support of an NGO. We were on the ground for months after Hurricane Dorian, where we gathered and flew out to Nassau to our temporary animal shelter, 215 animals. We housed and processed 195 of these animals in our temporary shelter that we called the pup tents. We had army tents set up down by the airport industrial park where we managed these on a day-to-day basis through volunteers. We reunited 77 animals with their owners who had fled Abaco and Grand Bahama, and we were able to find permanent homes and international adoptions for the remaining. In fact, Madam President, we spent so much in charters for airplanes that the charter company bought a brand new airplane after that. That's what we do. That's what NGOs do. NGOs sacrifice their time, their effort, their money to help in times of need. And we weren't the only ones. There are many NGOs there, and I commend each and every one of them that gave their time, their effort, their money, their planning, all of it, for the advancement of the country in these events of peril. Madam President, as I conclude, I want to thank the Prime Minister for his compassion and his boldness to do what is necessary to bring whatever semblance of finality possible to the families who have suffered as a result of Hurricane Dorian. The Prime Minister is a man of action. He is committed to the fulfillment of his promises to the Bahamian people and doing so without haste, with haste. The prior administration started looking at this issue months after Hurricane Dorian, but did nothing to bring finality to the suffering of the families with missing persons. Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands at the time, then fired and now the chairman of the FNM, suggested there may be changes to the 7-year rule on death certificates for missing people as early as October 2019. His comments may have been viewed as indicating a shift in the government's position at that time, because the then Attorney General, Carl Bethel, dismissed a suggestion by the then opposition leader, Philip Brave Davis, now the Prime Minister, to amend the law as we're doing today. Clearly, bad advice was given by the then country's lawyer. This is the crippling quicksand of how the former administration governed. Today, I am happy to be part of this New Day government, led by my good friend, the Honorable Prime Minister Philip Brave Davis, a man of action, a man that gets things done. So, Madam President, I am happy and proud that we advanced this piece of legislation today in fulfillment of our promises to the Bahamian people. I so move, Madam President, for the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable James Turner Roll.
Just a itty bitty piece of housekeeping before I get started here today, Madam President. Just reflected in the minutes, I'd wish that my name be reflected as James Roll Turner. That's important. The order is important.
Yes. Apologies, Senator James Roll Turner. I thought it was the opposite way around.
Thank you.
Sincere apologies. Yes. Sorry.
That's right. That's right. And my mother reminds me of that every occasion.
Yes.
So I thank her.
Please
I
give
thank
your
you.
mother my sincere apologies as well. From the chair, I humbly apologize.
Thank you, Madam President.
And I won't do it again.
Thank you, Madam President.
Please proceed, Senator James Roll Turner.
Amen. The Evidence Bill 2022 and its amendment number 2. Just before I get into that, there's a little bit, I'd like to share just a little of what's happening in Grand Bahama, because we continue to climb out of where we were to get to where we would like to be. But while I'm sitting amid all my fine Nasuvian colleagues here, my beloved colleague from Grand Bahama, and I suspect I shall say that Senator Hentfield is a part-time or a part-time Abaconian. Full-bred Abaconian. Yes, my brother. Yes, we are joined at the hips coming from the northern part of the Bahamas, so I hear you clearly. I'm committed to sharing whatever good news when there is some good news, because I've discovered in my life that death and its relative, the funeral, are news that you cannot control, you cannot schedule, but these things just happen. So whenever there's something pleasant or something good that has happened to us, you ought to declare it and let others know that there is certainly hope beyond. NACAC, the North American Caribbean Athletic Championship, is scheduled to take place on Grand Bahama, August 19th through 21st. I'm advised by my friends at the Ministry of Youth and Sports that this year's competition is expected to be the largest ever. We expect there to be some over 600 athletes traveling to Grand Bahama to participate in this event. This year, all of those athletes will be hosted at the Alukaya facility, and the officials of the event will be hosted at the Viva Fortuna facility. And I continue to share this news with others because it tells us that we are spreading the economic benefits of these events around. We see merchants, we see vendors all gearing up to make certain that we can take care of these people. We are expecting Team USA to bring a full complement of athletes. Canada will be there along with their strong team. And the current powerhouse in this Caribbean region, Jamaica, is also expected to be there. And I say current because I continue to remind people things change. Nothing stays the same. Things change. But as a Bahamian, I have polished my cowbells and I am practicing my rhythm because I expect that all visitors that visit our shore will know what home court advantage is. We expect every Bahamian athlete to perform as Bahamian athletes perform in the Bahamas. So we expect to be able to cheer them along. And I'm saying here to my Senate colleagues, there is room for you in Grand Bahama during this time of these athletic events. So you are officially welcomed August 19th through 21st. Now, this matter of the amendment to the Evidence Bill 2022, number 2. There are at least 3 of us here today that are survivors of Hurricane Dorian. Every time I speak about Hurricane Dorian, it's something unusual about it because it is a phenomenon like none of us had ever experienced. You heard the Honorable Senator say earlier that there was loss and destruction everywhere. Several years later, we're still affected by this. There has been a lot of worrying, a lot of stress, a lot of hoping, a lot of expecting a miracle. People praying for relief on this missing persons matter. While I will not claim a miracle here today, I can sure tell you that many prayers are being answered by this piece of legislation. Yes. In this bill, there is an insertion of a new section, Section 93A, Chapter 65. It really states that there is a presumption of death or final loss where a person disappeared in a circumstance of peril. There has been a lot of conversation since the bill was presented, and people reliving the heartaches when we saw the presentation of this most appreciated amendment. Because I am a Hurricane Dorian victim, Hurricane Dorian survivor, I don't take any pleasure in discussing this because it conjures up a lot of memories. Just within 3 minutes walk from where I live, there are neighbors, there are good friends that are gone and gone forever. The amendment states where any person is proved to have disappeared in circumstances of peril and the person has not been heard of or from for 2 years or more since the disappearance, and after proper inquiry made by or on behalf of those who naturally would have heard of or from the person, if the person had been alive, the court shall presume, until contrary is shown, that the person is dead, and the court in such a case may presume that the time of death of that person to be the date of the peril. For the purpose of this section, circumstances of peril include a natural disaster such as hurricanes. There is not much that I really wish to say here because there are friends and family members that live and have lived around the Casuarina Bridge area where I live. Good friends and folks that lived on the east end of Grand Bahama that have been affected by the disappearance and loss of loved ones. This amendment to the evidence bill is a live and piercing one, and it cuts to the heart of almost every Grand Bahamian and every Abaconian. The saying, "He who feels it, knows it," has taken on new meaning to many of us since Hurricane Dorian. This is a very personal piece of legislation that affects the families, many families that we know personally. Some of these names: Aaron Cooper, Adam Cooper, Danita Cooper, Rafaela Munnings, Dunlock Munnings, Shirlene Cooper, Monique Munnings, Howard Bevins, Hanley Maki, Roswell Pinder, Sybil Pinder, Tanae Pinder, Clarence Jones, and Marvin Rowell, whose bodies we eventually found. Omarion Munnings, Tara Lightburn, Javonte Ford, Philip Thomas, who is now passed, suffered emotional heartbreak because even today, Philip Thomas Jr. is affected by this legislation. Ramel Thomas, Matea Bethel, George Lang, Albert Bridgewater, and Lonnie, a good friend, Lonnie Freeman Carey, whose body we eventually found. These are all families that are affected by this piece of legislation. These are persons that have left wives, husbands, children, mothers, fathers, left these folks behind, and now this government has seen fit to fix a painful situation associated with missing and forever lost loved ones because of a peril. Moving the goalpost from 7 years to 2 years is significant. Madam President, there have been persons waiting for this declaration of legal assistance for some time now, waiting with heavy hearts, almost not prepared to accept what we all knew was the most likely conclusion, a total loss of life. Waiting for help for a long time is one thing, but waiting in vain is even a greater pain. Today, we recognize that we no longer wait in vain because the government of the Bahamas has heard the cry of the Northern Bahamas and is now acting to bring more relief. Surely there will be those whose homes and faulting mortgages will now be saved. Children's school fees will now be a bit more tolerable on that single parent and grandparent. Some additional financial comfort will come to many homes because of this declaration, rather than having to wait an additional 5 years. Who cannot pay mortgage for 5 years and expect to maintain that facility? Nobody. And I speak of this because I can tell you that there are so many of our friends, we have conversations that we never had. You know, Bahamians, we don't talk to people when we can't pay our mortgage. But when you are the lone survivor in your family with your children and the option of not being able to stay in your home, it removes that prideful spirit from you. And we hear the stories when the primary breadwinner has been missing since Hurricane Dorian. So when I tell you that this piece of legislation is important to the Northern Bahamas, truly it is. Today we see a government compassion clearly on display. Madam President, I stand here today in full unification with all of those from Abaco and Grand Bahama who suffered the most in recent losses relevant to this adjustment in the Evidence Act. I declare that not only do I support this amendment, but I say thank you publicly to all of those involved in this process. And thank you to those here today that will cause for some measure of relief from the trauma and pain that has become far too familiar. This amendment, too, will in some way help with closure to many of these families and bring some measure of emotional relief to the grieving and suffering friends and associated loved ones. As such, as a resident of Grand Bahama Island and akin to the folks in Abaco, I support this amendment. May God Almighty grant grace to those affected while He continues to guide and bless those who stand for others whose burdens of this life occasionally prohibit their ability to stand in difficult and emotionally turmoil times. Madam President, I thank you for this time and the opportunity to speak in these honorable chambers.
Thank you, Senator James Roll Turner. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
Thank you, Madam President.
Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I was forced to follow my brother from the north. I'm going to try and call his name. I just say the Honorable Senator. I don't want to invoke the anger of his mother. If I say it incorrectly, right? But
Desaline. Desaline.
Desaline
Low.
Low?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
who I consider a
Desaline
fellow,
Low.
who I consider a fellow survivor and a true man of the North. You know, we who live in the Northern Bahamas, we we try to stick together where we can. And I also appreciate the effort of government members to leave the politics aside today. My good friend, the Attorney General, made a valiant effort, to do so. Because, in times of natural disaster, it's never about politics, it's always about our people and how we move the needle forward a bit more to make it better for our people. You might have your time. You might have your time. You might have your time to prove your leadership. We did as best as we could in the moment. And I don't run from what we did. I was on the ground in Abaco, went there on the 31st of August, just ahead of the hurricane, because I'd spent my life in the military and thought I could make a difference. Didn't go for politics, went because that's what my family was and still is. People I love and grew up with. And hopefully we made a difference. Before I launch into what I've come to say, Madam President, I wish you permit me to extend condolences to the family of the former Speaker, the Honorable Vernon Simonet, a man who I believe many of us can learn a lot from when it comes to the way we should conduct ourselves in the arena of politics. A man who wore a color but wore no colors. He was a nationalist who only sought the best for the Bahamas. An island boy from Managua who came and entered politics, and it never changed him. Every interaction you had with him, he was always jovial and had a kind word and a smile to offer. I understand from the other place, listening to the members over there, that he was a member of a particular lunch bunch, which wears no color. They're just Bahamian politicians and those political aficionados who like politics, and they hang out together and they're good friends. I believe we have some people in the Parliament who are still like that, and I encourage more of us to be like Vernon Simonet and those people that he made his friends. Because at the end of the day, when we will have laid down our war tools, Madam Chaplain, and we go off into the sunset, we will hope that we have done our best as you continue to encourage us to do it. I'd also like to extend condolences to the family of Bishop Albert Hepburn, a giant of a religious leader in this country, a personal friend of my father's, who passed. Always a man with a warm smile, a very gentle demeanor, but a man who would speak his mind nonetheless. My father traveled to Cat Island with him. They were friends. As my father when he came to the ministry, he said to me, Bishop Hepburn is a spiritual father to me. Even though he came to the ministry somewhat mature, he always relied upon him to assist him with certain things. And he reminded me of an ordination that he came to Abaco to do with him for Bishop John McIntosh from down in Little Abaco. He said that he could always call on him. He was a friend and a mentor to many of our religious leaders and our pastors. And so on behalf of my father, on behalf of my family, I wish to extend condolences to his family. I'm glad that the leader of government business in this place rearranged our schedule so that we can come back here on Monday so that those of us who can make it can attend that funeral service as well. I plan to be there. May their souls rest in peace, and we welcome our students. We hope you learn something whilst you're here. You're the future of the Bahamas, and we expect you to pick up the gauntlet after we've laid it down and move us to another place. Madam President, the Attorney General used this word, and I made a note of it, normalcy. And I wanted to say to my friend that I don't know that the people in Abaco and Grand Bahama will ever again experience what we call normalcy in the general sense of the word after Dorian. I'm grateful for this opportunity to contribute to this debate aimed at amending the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person goes missing in circumstances of peril. but admittedly I do so with some mixed emotions that almost all things associated with Dorian evokes in many of us, my brother here, even to this day, who have been forced now to live in the aftermath of it. That said, I wish to commend the government for this effort to bring more closure, if this is at all possible, to the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama, who yet struggle to recover what they can post-Dorian. God knows that we have been through more than enough, and if this will help as intended, then we welcome it. Madam President, you are aware that the current disposition of the law has elucidated very clearly by the Attorney General, provides that after 7 years, if a person is missing in peril, that person can be declared dead. This bill which we debate today now lessens that time to 2 years. And ironically, we're now approaching the 3rd year anniversary of Hurricane Dorian. The amendment we make today will change the period of the presumption of death in the perilous circumstances to 2 years, and this is good. I'm not going to quibble over whether or not it should have been less time. It's a move in the right direction. In the immediate aftermath of Dorian, we were left with around $3.4 billion in damages, 55 unidentified bodies, and an unknown number of actual missing victims in Abaco. Shortly thereafter, we were advised that the official death toll was reported to be 70, and some 282 persons were declared missing. And so nearly 2 years after Dorian, some 22 persons reported missing in the storm were declared dead by the coroner, and their death certificates ordered. The AG explained all this, I thought, very well, and after he finishes here, he should perhaps consider becoming a tutor in law. He obviously likes to teach on the law. So in this vein, I wish to personally thank now Madam Justice Janine Weech Gomez, the then coroner, who presided over the hearings, for her painstaking work and efforts to bring closure to the families concerned post-Dorian. Madam President, the coroner did her job by taking the process as far as she could, but she was unable to issue the death certificates, and we heard why, because that power resides in another place, to the victims' families. And so the families were then left to take the record of the inquest to an attorney, to have an affidavit drafted, which could be taken to the Registrar General's Department to have a death certificate issued. We also heard the AG speak to this. And so I'm going to remind him to speed up that effort to put the Registrar General's position in place in Abaco. And one in Grand Bahama now, and so it will make the process much easier. You know, when you begin to talk to some of our people, you realize that they have to fly here to get these things done, right? You think that you can get an inquest from the coroner, the report, and then that could be emailed to you or sent to the administrator's office or some government official, even the magistrate. We have a magistrate in Abaco who should be a judge, I believe, by now, Ansela Evans, who's been doing a fantastic job, right? And these processes can be hopefully positioned in a way that they could be conducted without even leaving your island, because we had special circumstances where we require, I think, a little bit of a special intervention beyond what we see. Yes, this legislation changes the time of presumption, and this is what I was speaking to, but it doesn't change the procedure to be better able to respond to circumstances such as Dorian. And we have to work on it's not to cast blame. We have archaic systems and procedures in place that we have to work on improving. Perhaps in another life, we would be working on these things more directly together and more deliberately. I volunteer my services anytime when it comes to the betterment of the Bahamas and the Bahamian people, to use whatever training I may have. Arguably, there's been no more significant perilous event in the recent history of the Bahamas than was visited upon us by Hurricane Dorian just under 3 years ago. And so, Madam President, we all hope and pray that we never see a repeat of Hurricane Dorian. But sadly, it's very likely that we will, given the circumstances that we see with climate change and rising temperatures and the frequency and ferocity of these very catastrophic events. Before I leave the coroner's work, I wish to read into the record some reported recommendations she made in the event of a similar occurrence. As suggested here today, we must improve after such events. We must take away what some people call the teachable moments, so that we can better treat with them afterwards. No, I to this date, I still don't believe that. This is not the coroner now. I'll tell you what the coroner said. I still don't believe that we are in the position that we ought to be in, when we ask island administrators to manage such catastrophic events. When I went to Abaco ahead of Dorian, I went precisely to see what our preparations were. And the island administrators and their committees, their local committees, had done a fantastic job of mobilizing and doing what they had to identify the shelters and to identify who would be doing what in the event things went the opposite way, as they did. But I believe we passed that stage now where we should have trained disaster managers, disaster preparedness people, placed in these environments ahead of a storm. So, I mean, NEMA does its best to call meetings and to test the readiness and to see how we're disposed. For instance, on that day, we went into the mud and the pea in the immediate area and took Creole speakers and said, listen, you got to move, or no flowery language, in Creole and in English. If you do not leave this place, you're going to die. And to a man and a woman, they said to us, in my presence, we're going to leave at 6 o'clock. And you saw no sense of urgency, because I don't believe the Haymans on the whole felt that we know what hurricanes are, but we have not seen this type of hurricane for many, many years. I remember my grandmother talking to me about the hurricane of 1929, and how it displaced their communities to the point where they had to leave what they call Old Place, I believe it was, and come into the central part of Abaco. And they were granted land by the government, Murphytown, Dundastown, which were named after governors, so that they could begin again. I think they were all given like 5 acres at some point, which is still within many of the families that reside there. And so these things are going to get worse, and so we have to become better at the way we manage them. Gone are the days when we use the churches and the schools for shelters. I mentioned in here the other day that India gave us $1 million grant, and we moved. I was very happy and pleased as the minister responsible for foreign affairs to recommend to the cabinet that we build a proper community center / hurricane shelter. You know what it is too. You're in a storm. You don't know what's going on outside, but it's bad. And you're praying and you're hoping that when you get to a school shelter that had been impacted, you've been through this, right? You're hoping and you're praying to God Almighty that you find people still alive and well. It's a harrowing experience that I wish on no one. And immediately in that storm, most of the schools in central Abaco became compromised. All of the mud and the pea were destroyed because exactly what we told them would happen happened. 40-foot containers, 20-foot containers that were directly north of them on the port in Marsh Harbor were picked up by 20 feet high waves and pushed directly south over those communities. And it's a lesson to be learned there. I don't believe that Bahamians now will take for granted when they hear a hurricane is coming. somebody asked me when I landed in Marsh Harbor on the 31st of August, why are you here? I said, I'm here to tell people move or die. Because we knew that the hurricane was coming on a king tide, which meant, if you know anything about being in the boat, like my colleagues here, and Ruben, sorry, Senator Rami, a spring tide brings a high tide. And so a king tide brings an even more superior tide than a spring tide. And so you had waves coming in on you over 20 feet that pushed water beyond the dock in Marsh Harbor all the way over the hill. If you see where the government complex is, water flowed over the hill, unbelievably, right? And I said, this is unusual, quite unusual, right? Cars are moving in the water. Anything that's not nailed down is moving in the water. We wound up with a boat, about 55, 60-foot boat, sitting next. Yeah, I heard the member of parliament, and I commend him for it. I heard the member of parliament talking about how it's been removed or being removed, right? Sitting right next in the heart of town, right next to the Royal Bank, the Bank of Nova Scotia. Unbelievable, to come out of your house or wherever you were hiding out from the hurricane and to find landmarks moved. And an island where you were born and grew up, you had to stop and get your bearings. And so I hope that Bahamians now begin to appreciate the warnings when you're told to move, or, because as leaders, it's difficult for you to take first responders, and people are calling you from all over the place, and they're saying, look, we're trapped here, we're trapped there, we need assistance, and you have to make the difficult decisions. It's difficult to send first responders out in such circumstances where then they become harmed or killed. And then we're all left to fend for ourselves. But some of the recommendations made by the coroner, I thought were instructive. And so I wanted to read them into the record. And these include, but are not limited to, the following: mobilizing a missing persons call center. Well, I think what happened in those circumstances, but it should be mobilized somewhere else as much as you can from where the center or ground zero is, because our HQ, right, that we established was compromised in the back half of the hurricane, but we had a secondary location. Chief Superintendent Mortimer was fantastic with his team. We had some young officers from the Defense Force who reminded me of back in the days, 18, 19-year-old fellas who were doing their best to do what they could. And so this call center, separate and apart, people can immediately call in. But one of the issues that we found was that the satellite phones that we had, they didn't work out too well. And I always say this, and I say it unashamedly. I thank God for alive, and I it's good to be alive. It's the only thing that worked. And what Alive did was pre-positioned some of their assets ahead of the storm in order to facilitate communications after the storm. Yeah, please. And I give them an unshamed advertisement here today as a Senate of the Bahamas. I do, right? She also suggested that we should establish a mass fatality teams. I think we have these mechanisms in some form or the other, but more deliberately we must look at how we do these things. AG, you spoke to catastrophic events in general, and we must make more deliberate efforts as to how we manage and treat with these instances. She talked about procuring a mobile national forensic morgue. Do you know when you have an incident of mass casualty, as we've seen in the Bahamas, mainly with the sloops that come from Haiti, where sometimes things go wrong and you have persons die, you got to go and borrow a reefer, a freezer from the food store, a mobile freezer, to store these bodies until you can have them declared properly by the coroner, have them embalmed, and then have them eventually interred. And all of this we need to be prepared for. We need to be prepared for these things. procuring a mobile mortuary unit. No. I have no issue. I have no issue with that. The only thing when we bring them in, we must tell them you ain't come to stay. You come to train behaviors, right? And then adios, right? Go back. She said that we should address the adverse impact on the mental health of survivors. And imagine a coroner who's hearing stories, the one like my cousin David Cornish had to endure, where his Aunt Modena, who refused to leave her home, Uncle Dad, that's my mom's granduncle, my mom's uncle, really, my granduncle, refuses to leave her home to go to safety, and he's there hanging on to her for as long as he could, trying to beg and plead with her, and if you know their story, she raised them from a boy, and so can you imagine having to determine what you must do until a wave comes or a strong wind or something comes and just snatches her from you? And then your only one opportunity then is to do whatever you can to survive. I don't believe people really appreciate what went on in Abaco and Grandmama. Families in cars because their homes have become compromised or the shelter. And my cousin Junior tells me about a story that he thought he and his family were crossing the channel to Manawar because the water took them in the car. And they wound up, thank God, on the land. But he had really thought, with all of this motion and waves, we have to be out to sea, right? And so I'm going to go in Manawar Channel and end up somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. I spoke to a young man who had a baby in one hand and his wife in the other. And the elements took his wife from him. So how do you come to terms with, how do you treat with these things? And so as we approach the anniversary of Hurricane Dorian, I like many of the other survivors of this horrific event, we find ourselves trying to cope with the events that unfolded still. The horrors visited upon us in forms of unprecedented winds and rising water and extraordinary surges and tornadoes. Tornadoes would come in. You could see them coming, and thank God, in the government complex, there's an atrium where the winds would just pass completely through the building, and you were able to survive. But it took some windows and stuff like that. But it was a life saver to be able to house people after the first part of the storm passed. People came from the mud and the pea, those that survived. People came from Dundestown and Murphytown and Central Pines. And we gave instructions to open up the government complex. And so we had up near 3,000 persons seeking shelter in that complex. And then I started having visions of the dome in New Orleans. He said, Lord, what next? But we were able to manage in that community for the, I think if you went, you saw what that place looked like after. And so we lived through 2.5 days of, seemed like 3 days to me, James. 2.5 days of not knowing how loved ones were faring and what we would find when we were able to go out. I spent 3 days in that place and didn't go and look for my siblings. And it's the first time I think I really cracked when I found that here you are looking after others, and I found all of my family intact, my immediate family, my sisters and their children and my brother. And I kind of lost it for a moment, but then remembered this is a time now to lead. So when I hear people talk about leadership, it baffles me. No time for sleep or fear or second guessing. You just made a decision and you acted and you did all you could to survive in the circumstances. Very traumatic experience. And so I was moved. I had like 3 pages in my thing here today to talk about mental illness and post-traumatic stress. And I'm not going to touch them because I believe when I heard the Minister of Health this morning in the other place, speak to the bill, and I want a copy of the bill so I could take it home and look at it. It moved me almost to tears because there's a lot of trauma still lingering in the midst of us due to this Hurricane Dorian. And we must make a deliberate effort, as I see the minister is doing, and I applaud him for it. I applaud the government for it, because it is the right thing to do. It is a move in the right direction. Doesn't matter how many structures we build back, houses or schools or whatever else, if the minds of our people are not healed, are not treated for the traumatic events. There are children who still hear the rain and wonder if Dorian is back upon us, right? They're grown individuals who hear a strong wind and thunder and start to have moments of fear because they're not sure what is going on. Imagine all the rains we had in the last few weeks, how it impacted some of those individuals. And so I know that the government has in its budget, I think it was $2.5 million, and they had 60. And I know the minister, I have confidence. The $2.5 million that the minister has allocated in that budget is going to be put to good use to help our people to recover from this post-traumatic stress that is still ongoing in the midst of us due to Dorian. And you know what? Couple Dorian, which comes to you in September, and then 6 months later, you find yourself locked down because of COVID. You know, and so it's exacerbated already a bad situation. And you talk about the NGOs. Not all NGOs are good. And you have to decipher. You know, after the earthquake in Haiti, this is common knowledge, billions of dollars were pledged. And in the aftermath of an event, a catastrophic event, billions are always pledged. But are those billions realized? They most invariably, most of it is never realized. And if you went to the pledging conference that we had under the UN, UNHCR, was it? Right? A lot of pledges were made with attachments, right? Like I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, but you gotta let me do this and you gotta let me do that. And governments invariably have to make decisions. At one point, we had to stop NGOs from flying into Abaco because we had no air tower, we had no air traffic control, and it became so dangerous that I think it endangered the flight that the Prime Minister and a couple of his Caribbean leaders, our colleagues, were on, where planes came so close to them, they had to take evasive action in order to avoid another disaster within the zone, right? Within the zone. No, this for real, man. I ain't got no reason to lie to you, man. I ain't got no reason to lie to you. Or about Hurricane Dorian. Serves me no purpose. Serves me no purpose, man. You know, I believe it is safe to say that we are uncertain of the number of victims claimed by Dorian in Abaco and Grand Bahama. And you know why I say that? For a number of reasons. We have a number of migrant communities in Abaco and a number of migrant communities in Grand Bahama, where the residents of those communities don't report to the government I'm here. They do everything in their power so the government doesn't know that they're there, right? And so I struggle with this. You know, you cannot put a finite number on what may have happened. Irregular communities like these, they are exactly that. They are irregular. And so unless you were living in places like Dundastown, Central Pines, and Treasure Key, and Manawa, and Guanakee, and Elbow Key, and places like that, where you know your community, and so you can report to a government official, well, so-and-so is missing. I haven't seen him for a few days. Don't know what happened. He was here the last time I saw him. And so it's challenging to determine who lived where. And you know, these communities, irregular communities, were forced to withstand winds that gusted at 230, 250 miles per hour. Can you imagine houses built according to code? Find it difficult withstanding those type winds in a tornadic area. And also it's incumbent upon us, and I know this government is moving towards it too, to remove these irregular communities because they pose a danger to the residents and they pose a danger to the surrounding communities. Before I take my seat, Madam President, please permit me, if I hadn't done so already, somewhat of a more personal moment. You know, when I left my wife and children and flew into Abaco on Saturday, the 31st of August, 2019, I estimated that I'd be gone for at least 3, maybe 4 days. Max, you know what I mean by the time? Max, right? And I imagined we would be left with some issues of the kind that we'd become accustomed to. You saw the same thing. Like you'd find some foliage on the ground, some lampposts that you couldn't pass, and some roofs disturbed, and you had to go and do these things. But there's one thing we can now be certain of. Dorian left many broken people, and broken emotionally and mentally and physically and socially. And so I'm very pleased that we're doing all we can to ameliorate these circumstances for our people who still need a lot of support, who still need a lot of help. And this is not going to happen over one administration or 2 administrations. You can forget that. FEMA would tell you that after such a catastrophic event, it takes you at least, I think they said 14 years. If you go to some parts of Puerto Rico right now, they're still undone, right? If you go to certain parts of New Orleans, some of the communities never, ever even returned. And so I commend and congratulate the Bahamian people for our resilience. We are a strong people. There is nothing we cannot overcome, I believe, with God's help and grace, as long as we stick together. And with that, I support this bill. I support this amendment, and I hope it helps us to recover at least some of what Dorian has stolen from us. Thank you. Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you, Senator Darren Henfield, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell.
Good afternoon, Madam President and colleagues. Madam President, I am always mindful to firstly thank Almighty God for His mercies and blessings, for it is He who has elevated me to stand in this honored place to speak on behalf of the people of this great country. I am grateful, Madam President, to our distinguished Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Philip Edward Davis, for the confidence he has shown in me, as well as the support he has given me since appointing me to serve as one of his government honorable senators. Madam President, I too would like to welcome our summer students to the Senate. I wish them well in their endeavors after the summer, and I am hopeful that their experience here, where legislation is made on behalf of the people, would be beneficial to their future. Madam President, with your leave, I also wish to congratulate our newlywed in her absence, Senator the Honorable Dr. Eurecia Hepburn Forbes. May God grant her and her husband a long, fruitful, and happy until death marriage. Madam President, I also wish, on behalf of my wife Patrice and I, to extend condolences to Mr. Rufus Johnson on the passing of his firstborn, Miss Crescenda Melanie Johnson Tynes. Let me say that Rufus Johnson is a very active and dedicated stalwart councillor of the Progressive Liberal Party down here in Grand Bahama. However, what I really want you to know about Mr. Johnson is how much he loved his daughter. When he would give you updates on her condition as she went through a time of illness, you could literally feel his passion, his concern, his hope, and most of all, his love for his dear daughter. He truly loved his daughter, and may her soul rest in peace, and her memory be a continual blessing to him and his family. Madam President, while the Honorable Senator Handfield was speaking, it caused me to remember so much of the incidents that took place in Grand Bahama. And on one of my visits to Abaco, I went inside the government complex and went inside the conference room where I believe was the EOC. And picturing what you saw on television, it really gave me chills and goosebumps when you look at the sea down there on the northern side, and that the water would have actually climbed up that hill and surrounded that building and all the surrounding buildings. And so when you go to Abaco today, I can get to Grand Bahama and this bill in a second. But when you go to Abaco, there is no doubt that the spirit of survival, the spirit of get up and move forward truly exists in the Bahamian people. Madam President, one of the things I must say whilst on my feet, we talk about the number of deaths that occurred in Grand Bahama and Abaco. But let me say this about some young men, and I don't want to leave none out, and I can't remember all of their names, but I'll just recognize them today as the jet ski boys. We had about a dozen or so young men who went out. If you know the Castorina Bridge is at least 25, 30 feet above the canal. And the canal, the water had reached to the top of the Castorina Bridge. So you could imagine what was happening to those houses. Those single-story houses was basically covered with water. And those young men, in the middle of 180, 200 miles an hour wind, went out in the middle of the hurricane and saved countless of people, pulling people from their roofs, just pulling up the jet ski to their roof, because the water was up to the roof. Billy, one of our late late friend, to many of us in here, right? Those young men save countless, dozens of families, tying families on those jet skis to bring them to safety. I don't believe their story has been told sufficiently, and we must do much more to honor those heroes. Madam President, this evidence amendment number 2, Bill 2022, can be described as an act of compassion, an act of having a heart, an act of having a soul. I'm not a preacher. However, please allow me to take you to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 9, verse 36 to 38. Take it easy, Abaco. Reading from the New King James Version. But when he saw the multitude, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered like sheep having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. There ends the reading. Madam President, the horror stories of Abaco and Grand Bahama family members getting swept away by tsunami-like waves during the killer Hurricane Dorian are well documented and well known in every corner of the Bahamas and all over the world. But my people of Grand Bahama, and in particularly East Grand Bahama, and the great people of Abaco and the Keys don't need to read or watch the documentaries, for they have lived the horror stories, suffered the loss of loved ones, some losing multiple immediate family members, never to see them again. It was rough and extremely a sad time for those families and indeed those islands. And then came the storm within a storm. Families not being able to grieve or give their loved ones a proper burial or even an official memorial service, not being able to address banking concerns that was left behind, mortgages, business transaction, insurances, annuities or wills, not even being able to deal with trust funds and certain documents for the children. And most of all, having to rely on leaders that simply did not demonstrate the compassion or the heart or the soul regarding their problem. Madam President, like the people that our Lord and Savior had compassion on in the Bible verses that I read earlier, the people of Grand Bahama and Abaco must have no doubt felt like the multitudes who were weary and scattered, who were like sheep having no shepherd. Yes, Madam President, the harvest was truly plentiful, but the laborers were very, very few. Madam President, I want to take a minute to talk about a talk show that I was on, Beyond the Headline with Clint Watson. At that time, I was representing the unions and talking about the effect of the hurricane on workers. And after, working with various NGOs to bring assistance and relief to the many residents. As a matter of fact, at the time of the storm, I was the executive chef at the Grand Lacaille Hotel. And so two of my tasks, one was to assist in setting up the feeding program for Royal Caribbean, and the other was to set up the feeding program for World Central Kitchen. And between both of those programs, we would have done well over 1.5 million meals throughout Grand Bahama and Abaco. But back to the show. One of the points that I tried to really focus on during that show was the need to retrofit the law as it relates to the presumption of debt. Because you were already, this was just about 2 months after the storm, but at that time you were already hearing from families crying and complaining of not being able to deal with banking and insurances and mortgages and all of these things. And so from a union perspective, I made that plea to the government to act and act swiftly. I encourage my colleagues in the union at every opportunity to stress that particular point for me, to see if we could have gotten the government to act and act swiftly. And Madam President, I have always been a believer that as human beings, we are required to make choices every day. And the greater our responsibility, the tougher the choices we must be prepared to make. And I'll tell you why. Good choices by leaders are the foundation for creating a happy society. And a happy society will build a strong nation. Madam President, our Prime Minister and the legal team led by our able AG, Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder, must be commended for this humane, decent, compassionate, and caring bill. Madam President, what is ironic is that the actual amendment, Section 93A, inserted into Chapter 65 of the Act, is only 94 words. And 44 of those words are 3 letters or less. And so, what made it so difficult a task for the former government to seriously consider such a bill on behalf of these people, the people of Grand Bahama and Abaco? But what a game changer today is for those families who have been ignored and told to sit and wait for 7 years for relief, to be made whole and move forward with dignity. This debate today is about doing what is right for human being. This is about being able to say after 49 years of being an independent nation that we who occupy these seats that belongs to the Bahamian people of this country can, without fear or favor, have the conviction and the courage to put Bahamian people first. Thank God the wait is finally over for those families who have suffered unnecessarily without hope for far too long. Madam President, that is why today, I decided to wear a green tie, because I want us to recognize that this is springtime for those families. A new beginning, a fresh start. To simply put, a new day. What is happening here today is no accident. Let me just remind this Honorable Senate that the second point in the Honorable Philip Davis administration blueprint for change is to bring compassionate relief to the Bahamian people, and in doing so, increase the happiness index. The people of Abaco and Grand Bahama can say without a shadow of a doubt today, so said, so done. I want to just talk about the resiliency also of the people of East Grand Bahama. On Monday past, we went up to Coconut Fest. The Deputy Prime Minister was there. And the Coconut Fest in Grand Bahama is held in Pelican Point. When I went up to Pelican Point, a few days, about a week following Hurricane Dorian, I think there was one house in that settlement. It was, Senator Turner, if you could remember, it was that house on stilts, the two-story house. I can't remember if there was another house standing that was livable in Pelican Point. And when I went up there on Monday, there were thousands upon thousands of people enjoying Coconut Fest. And the majority of the residents, the families up there, are well on their way, if not completed, well on their way to rebuilding their community. So I think the people of Pelican Point ought to be commended. Madam President, just to add to the idea of taking care of our people and increasing their happiness index, I want to congratulate the team of Urban Renewal Northern Bahamas for the work they are doing. On Monday past, the team launched 11 summer camps in the Northern Bahamas. One was launched in South Abaco. This is taking place at the Assembly of God, and I want to thank Pastor Ernestine Wells and his congregation there for opening up their facilities to the young people. Yes, sir, you got it. In the North, at New Hope Ministries, Pastor Jackie Curry and her congregation. Yes. Moores Island, where Bishop Anthony Williams, former coach of Olympic gold medalist Stephen Gardner, is conducting a track and field camp at the Moores Island School, and we partner with him and will support him in his efforts. In Central Abaco, that camp will close out activities over there during the week of July 25th to 29. And we will be supporting the camp in Grand Key as well to ensure that we cover Abaco. You see, the good senator understand that that island is so big. And so you can't do one of nothing in Abaco and truly serve the people in that island. And so we made the concerted effort. And so I would like to, of course, thank our ministers, both Minister Obi Welchcombe, and who is the substantive minister for Social Service and Urban Development, and Minister of State Lisa Raming, for working with us and giving us the go ahead and funding, of course, to take care of these camps. The camp in Abaco are going under the theme Creative Kids. On Grand Bahama, there is Camp Outdoors, which is East Grand Bahama Camp. And there what we want to do, we want to start to do things through the camps to begin to establish various programs. And so we're going to use the camps as the springboard and as the test program to see what works. And so I can get to be able to use Nassau, right? So camp outdoors, we're going to do things like boys brigades, girls brigade, camping. We have the police, of course, the defense force who will be working with those kids to organize and carry those things. So I visited those camps yesterday, and it was just a wonderful scene. Camp Calypso is at Pine Ridge, and that's where we're starting the marching band and the dance and the drama program. So kids will be exposed to those things. Camp Keeping It Real is in West End, and what that is, what we're going to do in West End, we're going to teach the kids how to actually make the Kamalami sailboats, and then we'll teach them about fishing, and they'll go on the rocks and do some fishing and then clean their fishing, but we want to get our children into those kind of things. And then there's Camp Culture. Camp Culture is going on in Marcos City and Central, and in Camp Culture, what the kids are doing, they learn a little junk canoe. Of course, we're teaching them how to cook, learn to make little Johnny cake and little chicken sauce, little pea soup and those, and then also we have all the sewing machines out, so we have some volunteers and the camp workers who will be teaching the kids how to sew. And then Camp Olympics is happening in 8 Mile Rock, and that's a sports camp. And then, of course, there's Camp Blue Marlin, which is in Bimini, and that's an all-around camp. Of course, we would have already done a baseball camp in Bimini, as well as a religious camp at Gateway in Bimini. So this will be Bimini third camp, my brother. So you're far ahead. The children are coming out in droves, and the centers and the center managers and their team are doing a great job feeding and taking care of our children. The parents, of course, are excited and extremely happy to be able to send their children or drop their children to these various camps where the children are engaged in healthy, fun, and productive activities. Let me right now just mention and thank ACP Theophilus Cunningham and the police departments of Grand Bahama, Abaco, and Bimini, who are doing a fantastic job assisting us with all things urban renewal, the band, the walkabouts, the senior programs, the youth programs, the camps, community policing, you name it. They are just there with us. This is a relationship focused on revolutionizing and transforming the community. So, I just like to thank ACP Theophilus Cunningham and his team. Of course, I want to also recognize the Church of God of Prophecy Christian Education Department. This is a group of women, ministers and laypersons who are conducting free Bible school studies at all the programs and all the camps over the summer. And of course, you can't build the children if God is not an integral part of it. And I just want to thank all those who are assisting in whatever way to make these summer camps successful. In closing, I am very happy to update the Senate on our small home repair program. I want to say that tomorrow, Grand Bahama will welcome the urban leadership team out of Nassau, including our minister. The team is set up to work as long as needed to ensure that the full weight of the ministry is given this weekend to completing contracts and ensuring that we begin a strong and sustainable housing repair program with immediate effect. The urban team in Grand Bahama have completed the heavy lifting. They have completed hundreds and hundreds of assessments and are continuing to assess. And the contractors are ready to go. Homeowners are ready for the relief as promised, and we are ready to begin. I also want to say that we have gotten hundreds of homeowners requests out of, before I go to Abaco, the team has already been deployed in Bimini right after that tropical storm that passed, because that did a lot of immediate damage to Bimini, and so we would have already begun to to actually complete the repair work on some 31, 32 homes that were damaged during that storm, and so they should be in good shape. The team, once they will have completed this weekend with our local Grand Bahama team, that team led by Mr. Kyle Stewart will be traveling to Abaco to get men contractors on the roofs of those homes in Abaco and to bring the necessary relief that is so desperately needed to complete many of the homes that are still outstanding and are in need of help. So the point is, all that we are doing and all that we intend to do, just like this evidence bill that we are debating here today, is simply to provide compassionate relief to all Bahamians and increase their happiness index. Madam President, on behalf of the families of Grand Bahama and Abaco, and I want to sincerely thank my good friend and colleague, Senator Turner, for actually reading into the records of this Senate the names of some of those persons who are missing in Grand Bahama. Many of them are persons that I personally know, an entire family goes to my church, husband, the wife, and the daughter who was scheduled to start her bachelor's. She had just completed her associate, and she was scheduled to start her bachelor's class, Senator, actually on the 1st of September. And she was a very, very, very decent young lady. As a matter of fact, up to the time when she was killed and attending college, she was the altar server at St. Vincent de Paul Roman Catholic Church down there in Hunters. Very decent family. And so, on behalf of all those families, those in Grand Bahama and Abaco, who've lost loved ones and whose loved ones is presumed to be dead as a result of their disappearance during the passage of Hurricane Dorian, or in circumstances of peril, I am honored to support this bill. May God continue to bless the government of the Bahamas, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michaela Barnett Ellis.
Thank you, Madam President. As always, I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a contribution in this honorable upper chamber. Before I begin my contribution, however, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate all of the swimmers, coaches, officials, swim parents, swim supporters, and volunteers for an exceptionally successful Bahamas Aquatics Association National Championships, and a special congratulations to the Mako Aquatics Club for their repeat victory. Swimming is a full-body sport that is a very jealous mistress. It requires discipline not only from swimmers, but from parents and coaches. I would also like to take the opportunity to recognize the Barracuda Swim Club, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary. The Barracudas, even the Attorney General swam for Barracudas. The Barracuda Swim Club has taught generations of Bahamians to swim and become competitive swimmers. That's 50 years of talented coaches, 50 years of swimmers, 50 years of unwavering determination, 50 years of racing at an elite level, and 50 years of family. One team, one family. And I would like to thank Barracudas for 50 years of developing Bahamian swimmers. And as a matter of full disclosure, my daughter swims for the Barracudas Swim Club. We are here to debate the amendment to the Evidence Act to include a presumption of death where a person has disappeared in circumstances of peril. And Madam President, with your leave, I would like a moment of silence to commemorate those persons who have gone missing. Thank you. Peril is commonly defined as serious and immediate danger, and a presumption of death is a presumption in law. Presumptions in law are made by the court in the absence of opposing evidence and are conclusive for the party in whose favor they operate and for the purpose which they operate. In order to apply this presumption, the court must be satisfied that there's no acceptable alternative evidence that a person was alive during the relevant period. And generally, when applying this presumption, the court must be satisfied of three things. One, that there are persons who are likely to have heard from the person during the period. Two, that those persons haven't in fact heard from them. And three, all due inquiries have been made. The government has marketed this amendment as a promise delivered, but it is the equivalent of promising that Friday will come after Thursday. The Coroner's Act 2011 allows the coroner, in the manner described by the Attorney General earlier, to open and conduct an inquiry to establish that a person has died, that the person's identity, and when and where the person died, the cause of their death, and the circumstances of their death. The coroner has, since 2011, conducted inquiries and inquests into the disappearance of persons in the Bahamas. And if the coroner is satisfied by the evidence presented before them regarding the circumstances of the disappearance, including circumstances of peril, the coroner can issue an order that a person is missing and presumed to be dead. There is no need to wait for 7 years or for 2 years for the matter to be investigated by the coroner's court. Families affected by Hurricane Dorian have benefited from the jurisdiction of the coroner's court. In an article in the Tribune dated the 21st of May, 2021, and I can table the article, titled Death Certificates to be Issued to the Family of 5 Dorian Victims, Leandra Roll wrote, I quote, "A coroner's court yesterday ordered that death certificates to be issued to families of 5 victims who died during Hurricane Dorian in 2019, after ruling that drowning was their most likely cause of death. In a written ruling handed down yesterday, Coroner Janine Weish Gomez ordered for death certificates to be issued to the families of James Capron, Jeffrey Danis, Melita Amezi, Antonio Outen, and Claudine Etienne. 4 victims who were previously reported missing were officially confirmed dead after their bodies were positively identified by the police by DNA analysis. Yesterday, Coroner Weish Gomez labeled the likely cause of death for all the victims named as drowning. I have ordered that death certificates be completed by the pathologist to reflect the names on their respective death certificates that were initially labeled as unknown, and that the families be permitted to collect those death certificates through the Registrar General, she told the court. The jurisdiction of the coroner's court is not disputed, and to suggest that families who lost persons during the passage of Dorian are without relief is disingenuous. The present amendment creates an additional statutory presumption in law, but it does not, however, create an additional way for persons to obtain a death certificate. In fact, since 1983, a spouse can, under Section 70 of the Matrimonial Causes Act, apply for an order declaring that a spouse is dead and declaring that their marriage be dissolved. But this cannot help parents, children, or siblings in circumstances where the missing person is unmarried. This amendment alone fails to provide the relief advertised by the government. In other jurisdictions, there are statutory provisions which allow for a next of kin to apply to the court for a presumption of death order. In the United Kingdom, the Presumption of Death Act 2013 provides that a next of kin may apply to the court for a declaration that the missing person be presumed to be dead. The UK legislation provides a statutory framework for persons with missing relatives to find relief and closure. The present amendment does not provide a framework to actually solve the problem. This administration has repeatedly made promises to solve problems, but haven't actually solved the problem. Airport employees are waiting for their promised back pay. We are waiting for the government to reveal its solution to save the NIB fund. We are waiting for relief to address high fuel prices. Bus drivers and taxi drivers are waiting for the promised relief. We are waiting for inflation relief, and it's become the norm in the food store to see items piled up at the cashier because persons have decided what is most important for this week's budget. Business owners are waiting for the government to provide relief for the increasing cost of doing business in the Bahamas. We have been waiting for the government to provide an amendment to the Sexual Offences Act, and before the good AG interrupts, we know it's with the Minister of Social Services. This, like the amendment for the Sexual Offences Act, has a simple legislative solution. If you are serious about providing relief to persons who have lost loved ones in circumstances of peril, bring an act to Parliament which would allow persons to apply to the court for an order that a person is missing and presumed dead. Create a simple process so that families, not just those impacted by Dorian, but families like Captain Byron Ferguson, can find closure. Madam President, the Bahamian electorate expects us to provide solutions to their problems. This isn't just the purpose of campaign promises. This is a real opportunity to actually deliver. We need more than a presumption. We need an application. In Ontario, a family member can apply for an order that somebody is missing, presumed dead. In Louisiana, an interested person can also apply for an order that somebody be declared missing and presumed dead. I look forward to supporting a presumption of death bill, which sets out a clear procedure and framework for these applications, whether it's brought by this administration or by our administration. Madam President, let us actually do what we have been constitutionally bound to do, and that is make laws for the good government and peace of the Bahamas. Madam President, may God bless you. May God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas as we head towards our 50th anniversary as an independent nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Michaela Barnett Ellis, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Madam President. Madam President, I'd like to join with my Senate colleagues in first congratulating or welcoming the students that had joined us today. And I will also like to say a pleasant good evening to my Senate colleagues. Madam President, the modern post-independence Bahamas suffered its most tragic and grievous of natural disasters and loss of life in the early days of September 19. The name is Dorian. The name Dorian is forever etched in our memories, and its infamy and ruthless destruction shall forever make every Bahamian more responsive and respectful and fearful of the hurricane's path, which encompasses our tropical islands sprawn across the Lucayan Sea. Today, we meet to pass the Amendment of Relief, a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril, cited as Evidence Act number 2 of 2022. Madam President, before I dive into my contribution, I clearly noticed that the opposition senators are clearly on different pages based on the contributions I've heard so far. It's very clear. Are you supporting the bill or not? The bill seeks to give the Bahamian people who have suffered during Hurricane Dorian relief. They clearly have relief based on the bill that we are presenting today. And so I thought it was a bit disingenuous for Senator Ellis to speak down to the bill, basically, and also for Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield to also support the bill. So I mean, they are clearly on cross paths, and they think they need to get aligned. Do you support the bill or not? That's it. Okay. There's no false advertising in this bill. The bill is the bill. The bill gives a relief. The bill puts
Order.
The
Order.
bill puts the what the government seek to do in legislation in statutory form.
Senator
Okay.
Senator Bigstock, speak to the chair, please. Thank you.
Madam President, while the survivors of Grand Bahama and Abaco can find some solace in the relief of settling the estates, circumstances, and affairs of their loved ones who are presumed perished in the Dorian disaster, their grief will forever be with them. Madam President, the foreboding reality of what has brought this legislation before us today ought not to be overlooked. Make no mistake about it. Hurricane Dorian menaced our nation. Today, lives are still broken, souls are still crying out for dignity. Lives remain unmended. Our national economy and the economies of Abaco and Grand Bahama are being tested for their resilience. Madam President, Dorian, according to the information supplied online by reputable weather reporting agencies, is the strongest hurricane on record to hit the Bahamas. In some instances, Dorian poured down Judgment Day on these islands for 48 hours nonstop, refusing to move as it pelted communities and unleashed its fury. It caused record-high storm surges and wind damage. It recorded 910 millibars in pressure, and its highest winds were at 185 miles per hour. Madam President, surely the good Lord and only heavenly intervention could have ended the catastrophe of this magnitude. Madam President, I would be most grateful for the former member of Parliament for a constituency on Abaco who sits now in this place, for him to convey my personal sympathies and concerns for scores of persons. I am sure he would know personally who are impacted by the demon of Dorian. It was indeed impactful for me to watch the contribution in that other place by sitting members who today represent constituencies on Grand Bahama and Abaco as they related the horrendous and enduring pain which Dorian disaster created. Human life is precious. In our faith, we enter the world knowing we shall pass from this world. The time, event, and circumstances are not revealed. Madam President, when you listen to the stories of survivors and the grieving relatives of missing and presumed dead persons, you feel the horror and terror of their pain, the damage of water and wind, the brave and courageous who tried to save others only to be mercilessly swept up in the surging and menacing waters of the most deadliest natural disaster we have known as a nation. Madam President, this focused amendment is what we do as legislators. We find consensus to solve thorny or sticky issues by finding paths in the law and in practice and delivery to make life better and easier and convenient for our citizens. Without this amendment, which is before us today, there would be a much longer wait of 5 more years before families of missing and deceased could get closure to their loss. In statute, Madam President. Madam President, I commend the Honorable Attorney General and his staff for recognizing the impetus and the importance of this amendment and the punctuality of the legislation. It must be a double lick of a cruel stick to know your loved ones is dead, to have seen and witnessed the elements swept a loved one away, and then having to suffer the added indignity of wading through the previous legislation with its uphill steep climb and the laborious timeline. This legislation is government in action. This is government solving problems. This is government responsive, alert, and ready, compassionate, and caring. Madam President, every single time a legislation is brought to this chamber, the opposition either have one phrase or sentence to say that they had it on the table, right? They always have it on the table, Madam President. Never take it off the table. They had this legislation on the table, I suppose, or supposed to have brought this legislation to the chamber and never did. Now, the same opposition is now saying that this problem is being cured by the coroner's court. But we seek to be more decisive, and we seek to add certainty by putting it in legislation, Madam President. Madam President, the country is discovering every day that it is the Honorable Philip E. Davis and Deputy Prime Minister I. Chester Cooper who have the healing, caring hands. Madam President, there is this anomaly, as I wish to term it, in the state of affairs on the recorded deaths, dying and missing in Grand Bahama and Abaco as a result of Dorian. In Abaco, in particular, where there exists a very vibrant and undocumented class of Black persons, many born in the Bahamas, but whose lineage may be linked to migrants from the Republic of Haiti, who are suspected to be amongst the nameless, the faceless, and missing, and presumed dead. As a nation, we must seek to bring closure. John Donne, and I quote, says, never send to ask for who the bell tolls, because it tolls for thee. As a nation, we must seek to bring closure. I have been in many serious conversations with persons in whom I verily believe to be telling the truth, that the former government knew more than they were telling us, and they knew more than they were prepared to share with the country on the lives lost and unaccounted for in Abaco. I have also been in conversations with persons in whom I verily believe to be telling the truth, that the former government activated a garrison political machine in Abaco to suppress certain ethnic communities from coming forward with information and data. I am still in disbelief that the former Prime Minister, new in office, without any record of having to deal with such a tragedy as Dorian, refused to follow the lead of his counterparts elsewhere in the region, who have sought the able assistance of former Prime Minister and community leaders to assist in the post-Dorian recovery. What is even more troubling for me, Madam President, and I am sure it will be the issue historians will write about long after all of us have gone our way, is the contempt that was shown by the former Prime Minister in rebuffing his predecessor in office, the Right Honorable Hubert Alexander Ingram, who for more than 35 years represented a constituency in Abaco and had the experience, the knowledge, and international contacts to head any commission or committee appointed by the government to bring relief to the people of Abaco after Dorian. Madam President, I have said it in here many times. Anyone who sits around a table and aid and abetted irresponsible decisions and vendettas, you fail the Bahamian people. You fail your duty, and you fail in your representation and discharge of your constituency and your people. Yet, in the aftermath of this most peculiar and national disaster, the record shows that the Prime Minister of the day, conforming to what his successors in office has termed as sheer arrogance. The former Prime Minister was stubborn in his refusal to bring a national consensus and a strong team to advocate and direct and assist in the post-Dorian protocols. And when the former Prime Minister did act, it was to appoint his personal political operative at a lavish salary with mind-bending perks in the midst of a hurting and hungry people languishing after the torment of Dorian. A higher power, Madam President, must have again heard the cries of the people and the appointees of the Prime Minister, and now all under judicious inquiry of the people. Madam President, lest we forget, a high office in this very chamber was vacated to allow for a political operative to assume a cherry-picked post created by the former government. Yet, another special person seemed to be benefiting in largest at the expense of the people's purse and solely on the whim and fancy of the former Prime Minister. What a sad, sad and disgraceful state of affairs. And those who wish to hide like ostriches with their necks and heads buried in the sand are reminded that they should have nothing to fear, because one thing is very certain, and that is the minister's short-lived era is over. Madam President, if you have done nothing for which you ought to be ashamed, Madam President, then you should not carry the water for those who have been weighted in the balance and found wanting. Madam President, it is no wonder that after the dust settled on September 16, 2021, what was once regarded as 2 safe F&M seats were comfortably in the win column of the PLP. The people, even in their grief and sorrow, turned to the new day. And here we are with this amendment about to fix a major component of relief. And I dare say, Madam President, that the behavior and cowardly lions and heartless tin men in the former government's machine owe it to themselves to shake the devil off. This is 2022. Had the former government been about its business with honor and integrity, this amendment before us today and other reliefs would have taken place in their watch satisfactorily, but it was not. It is in times like these, Madam President, that the country should pause and recognize how the new Prime Minister,
Order.
Davis,
Order. Members on the floor.
360-degree fountain of relief, effervescence, efficiency, and competence. It looks, Madam President, let's look at the record. Madam President, having failed the nation and themselves with the heavy lifting required in the aftermath of Dorian, the FNM government limped into the COVID-19 pandemic, even more unprepared, awestruck, and dumbfounded. The historians of tomorrow will be astonished to review speeches and media statements of the period in which the former government, in the height of a world pandemic, threw its hands up in the air, sat in the corner with their thumbs in their mouth, crying about the issues and the tasks and the work before them.
Point of order. The member is misleading.
Can you please take the point of order?
The member is misleading this place. And unless the member can show where the former government sat in the corner, threw its hand up in the air, right? And thumb in his mouth, he ought to withdraw it.
That's his opinion, Senator Handfield. That's his...
I'm sorry.
Please.
I stand corrected, my lady. I stand corrected. He said it's his opinion?
Yes.
Let me hear it from these. That was my view, Senator Handfield. Just let me confirm, because it may not be his opinion. He may have some facts to
Madam
back it up.
President, it is my opinion.
It is your opinion.
And I clearly state that.
You stated previously that is your opinion?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't rely on anything. This is my speech.
Please proceed, Senator Bixter. Order.
But given the opportunity.
Thank you. Please proceed. Thank you.
Yeah. But given the opportunity to recruit talent and assistance to their side, they played the political fool and paid the price for it, and selfish motives at the polls. In the words of the leader of all FNMs, they were simply arrogant. Your leader, yes, your leader, yes, of all FNMs, the opposition seem to be confused who the leader of their party is. No, I all over the place.
Speak to the chair, please, Senator Bixter. Senator Bixter.
Can you imagine?
Speak to the chair.
Can you imagine, Madam President, Churchill sitting at number 10 Downing Street, weeping and looking for sympathy when the air raids, weeping and looking for sympathy when the air raids sirens went off in the city of London? Madam President, can you imagine the American president hiding in his bunker, afraid to stir his people to hope and faith after the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center towers? Madam President, look at Zelensky in Ukraine. Leadership under the most difficult of circumstances, and real leaders raise and lift their countrymen out of these perils, Madam President. Madam President, can you imagine? Well, Madam President, I go back and I would really like to seek or to understand the point that my fellow colleague or opposition senator made with respect to the bill that we have before us today, because I clearly don't understand her point, Madam President. And clearly the opposition seem to be a little lost as it relates to this, what this amendment is trying to achieve. Madam President, I shall continue. Madam President, I said in times like these, leaders come to the fore and they lead, which is what our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip E. Davis, is doing. He is leading, and he is leading by example, Madam President. Madam President, all we got in the Bahamas was television commercials of Dr. Minnis walking around his dad's service station like he wanted to pump gas rather than run the country. So beleaguered was the former government that the Prime Minister eventually tossed his towel and threw his hands up in surrender, came out with his hands up with all of the yes men who sat around the table and said, we can't take it no more. We need a general election so the people can send us all home. And the people did convincingly. And so it was, Madam President. The Bahamian people gleefully sent the former government packing. They could not get the job done. The challenges of the new world in which we live will cause men and women to stumble. No question about it. But you get back up on your bruised knees and you lead, not complain. Real leadership is not about whining. Real leadership is about talking about real leadership is not talking about how many babies you delivered. When so many people are dying, are dead, and falling through the cracks. Listening to the former government is more entertaining than reading my son's last copy of the diary of a wimpy crybaby, of a wimpy kid, crybaby Sourline. Within the last several months upon coming to office, the new Prime Minister has made the term and word climate change a household term in this country. Further, Prime Minister Davis has put the world on notice at international climate discussion forums how concerned we are over our island nation's vulnerability to climate change. The Prime Minister has summoned all hands on deck in our nation as we prepare, strategize, and organize to save our share of this planet, which God has given to us. Madam President, this amendment brings relief. It cannot ease all the pain. It cannot bring back wives, husbands, sons, daughters, friends, grandparents, grandchildren, lost in the disaster of Dorian. It cannot restore the dignity of those whose existence may never ever be revealed. But this amendment tells the suffering and the grieving people of Abaco and Grand Bahama that there is in office today a government which cares and is thinking about them and improving and adding new ways to ease their heavy burden. The Attorney General and the government must move expeditiously on national urgencies, such as this one before us today, and in so doing, live up to the famous words of that great Bahamian statesman, the Honorable Arthur D. Hanna, who says, our work is not done until we wipe the tear from every eye. I thank you, Madam President. May the fallen, the lost, the missing rest in peace. I commend them to an all merciful God. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Darren Pickstock, for your contribution. As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Reuben Ramming.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank God for the opportunity, the time, and the ability to be able to stand here again, speak on behalf of the Bahamian people as it relates to this amendment that has been tabled. I am also grateful for the majority of senators and their contributions, through whom the spirit of compassion and understanding of the people who we seek to bring relief to, you can see was paramount in their presentation. Because This is not an amendment to attract ambulance or hearse chasers. This is an amendment to address some very real situations. I'm sure we all could agree, as Senator Barnett would have said, that the law was not totally impervious to in its ability to address these matters, but definitely it would have been so slothful and maybe even out of reach of the regular average person. So although these amendments and its intent in part could have been, and there have been success stories of it meeting the mark or the intent of this bill through some persons, we must seek at all times to reach as many people as possible. So this amendment would help to open the door a bit further and help to make it that much easier for persons to seek closure. I agree with Senator Henfield, Turner, and Russell, who's had expressed the realities of what Bahamians who have survived Dorian are still going through. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a very serious thing. And I myself have met persons who, at the song of rain and at the song of thunder, find themselves reliving the trauma of Dorian. In this instance, no government could use the political term of wiping every tear from their eyes, because that is far beyond. We need the grace of God to guide our people through. But as much as it is within the power and scope of legislators, it is our duty to do our due diligence and demonstrate a duty of care to ensure that legislatively we make as clear and as convenient a path as possible for persons who find themselves in this situation. This amendment affords privileges under special circumstances, such as Dorian. And in that vein of special circumstances, I do see the benefit to the households and the families who would have been set back financially, legally, and otherwise, and in matters of finance, estate handling, that could have eased some of the side effects and burdens of losing a particular individual in the family, whether through insurances, whether through land holding, whether through access to resources that may have been in a certain name, whether it is the management of the estate or having the legal authority to be able to move things around to ease their burdens, because we all know government can only do so much. NGOs can only do so much. But in as much as some persons in the midst of death have legal right to some benefit through insurance policies or other means, we should do our best to ensure that they have access to these entitlements. So for that, I'm very, very glad. For me, the most important thing is, how do we make the way a bit more smoother for those who are debilitated and remain debilitated as a result of this trauma that we call Dorian, and in future traumas coming forward. For with that, we understand the normal processes through our judiciary, which could be rather laborious or sometimes expensive if you want to expedite it in getting the best, most experienced lawyers to maneuver. And at this stage, if you really look at it, and you look at it through the eyes of the people who went through what they went through at Dorian, they really don't need to be struggling with all these kind of things. It is completely different than someone who lost their mother and their father in a society that is functioning. Their jobs are intact, their schools are intact, and they can go home to their bed to mourn. They could rely on other family members immediately around them, as opposed to someone who lost their mother or father or child, and in the midst of that complete devastation, don't have a chance to breathe or catch themselves, because not only are they suffering that loss, they're losing everything in every direction. That makes this a very special circumstance and human needs. And although, as proven through Senator Barnett, that there have been matters resolved in the coroner court, this is right and proper for us to ensure that these special circumstances have the red carpet instead of the red tape, and do our best to ensure that. With this in mind, this does shift in the spirit of the resurrection when the stone was rolled away from the tomb. This does roll the stone away. But yet we still have to do much to unbound the situation. So I had asked the AG, and I will yield to him a few very important things, because after we'd have passed this legislation, there are questions being asked, and I did try to answer it to people, and I found out that to the AG point, when I spoke to him, that I did answer it correctly. But I wanted to say it publicly, because persons need to know what this bill does. It's not sufficient for us to pass it, drop it, and then leave and say, your guy should know what this should do and everything else. Because here we have the real issue of probate. And I'd asked the AG a couple of questions, one of which is, how does this move along the process of not only probate, but how does it move along the process as it relates to the coroner court? And also in the same vein, can we, under the intent of this bill, under special circumstances, allow there to be a special type of probate court that could be set up in these islands, along with probable legal clinics in these islands where those persons are? We know many of them now still in Nassau, where the legal system could afford them the greatest ease for counsel and how to begin accessing the intended benefits that this legislation should help them open, to educate persons now how this would apply with them legislatively, and also possibly if the government can facilitate, with help from the judiciary, a special court such a system that can be set up especially for persons in this category so that they could adjudicate their matters in the swiftest possible time. And I'd humbly ask the AG if he would, because I think that is of public interest and the spirit of the intent of this bill, and it would be helpful to others. And I'll yield for the AG. He'll address it in the wrap-up. Because that's very, very critical, because it's one thing to make something available in law, as we all know, and still the intended persons who we seek to help many times don't find their way, understand, or even under the stress and burdens that they actually have, don't receive the full benefit and access that we have afforded for them. I sit back and I remember Eric. And I remember Eric's story. And I think it was Augustine. Augustine is his last name. And I remember him saying in his story, Madam President, that when the water was rising up and his family was there along with his mother, he told everybody, just hold hands together. And what stuck with me, he told his children, said, listen, no matter what happened, don't let go of me. And while holding on, his mom broke loose and he reached out with his hand to grab his mom. And just as he touched his mom, Dorian threw a piece of plywood and slashed his arm off. And you could imagine in the midst of that, your arm, your arteries, and that blood and that bleeding, and those children through fear still obeyed daddy and just held on. And with one arm and massive loss of blood, he held on. You know, this is some real and tangible things that people went through. And even those of us who did not ride out the storm with them, even us, we find ourselves in our hearts grieving for them. And that's why I was pleased that the majority of senators didn't see this as an opportunity for ambulance chasing and hearse chasing and for the spirit and the intent that which this bill is supposed to be, one of compassion and the ability to bring some degree of closure as best we can, because the true healing is out of the reach of government, but we have a duty to do the best in which we can. I remember the man in Grand Bahama with his wife telling the story of how he climbed up on the table and lifted up on the table, then they climb up on the china closet, and then they ripped through the rafter of the roof, and they couldn't get through the roof, so they're holding on to the rafters on the inside of the roof. And he watched his wife get swept out of his hand. He was seeing the furniture drifting, and it's like a current just ripped her out of his hand. And he was devastated. And quite frankly, now I think when you see it, even approaching these things after 2 years is devastating to a lot of people, and it could cause a lot of them to still be in a state of trauma just to relive this. So by the government going into those environments and say, you know something, we will bring the law to you. We're not doing this under ordinary circumstances. We will bring the law to you. To me, that is one of the greatest human aids that our government could bring about. Send a team of people in there, advertise that, listen here, we're coming in here, those who have these things that are still outstanding. We're going to send people in there, legal aids. We'll help you pull together your documentation, formulate your thoughts, build your strategy, and then we'll help compile a case listing, and then we will send the judges this down there to adjudicate your matter. We're going to take you out of the mainstream probate matter and the mainstream lying up in the mainstream backlog of cases, because we have passed a legislation that makes it even more clear that you could now, and you have passed the 2-year time, that this door is open, and we want to expedite you accessing whatever was yours under law through claim, through property, through wills, through the benefits from death. I consider that paramount. And I would end with this point, and even in the process of doing that judiciously and giving the legal counsel, where you find persons in need of further psychological and spiritual counseling, you turn them over to the relevant authority, either to the councils and those areas, et cetera, so that the people at the end of the day have help. The Bible says a very important thing, it says, as a man thinketh, so is he. A traumatized Bahamian without the warmth of love and community is really a dysfunctional Bahamian. Many of them will show up to work and they will be typing and doing everything right, but they're shells of human beings. And we must do everything we can to meet them where they are. So apart from the legal services, and I know there's a mental health bill coming up, which I commend. I'm going to read it. The spirit of it that I heard, I commend it tremendously. Have the social services, Brother Russell and Irvin Manuel, go in there, because you're not only going to help them legally, you're really trying to see where their needs are and how we can best assist them. And that's inclusive of the children. So I commend the government for this. And this is how it should work, There are times where we find that, yes, there are in law certain things that could be done, even as it relates to the sexual offenses bill. Really, if you look at the existing laws, there's a lot of ways in which things can be addressed, but yet you're going to find a way to streamline things a bit more. And we're streamlining this by this amendment.
I don't think anybody could consider anything perfect because we have not yet seen what tomorrow will bring. The AG raised a concern about donors and Dorian. There were so many things because the category storm of Dorian and its catastrophe and its midst of an emergency. They still have to follow these same laws and procedures. I'll give an example as simple as being able to give the VAT exemptions. The law did not allow for any type of exemption to assist in that category. We had to come back and make an amendment to empower and allow the government to do certain things. So yes, there are always shortcomings in disasters. And sometimes when the shortcoming hits you, then it's a long coming and it's terrible. But our legislative system needs to be constantly overhauled for us to anticipate what we can possibly face again in our country. Because God forbid, Dorian were to land in New Providence. Then everyone would have been singing a whole different tune. And I'll end with this point, Madam Speaker. I remember when the storm hit our southern shores, and we had to evacuate the people from Ragged Island, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember an old man who decided he's going to stay and ride out the storm, which he regretted. Thank God in that storm, he was able to tie himself. He had to leave the house in the storm and tie himself to a tree in order to be able to endure that storm. That worked for him. That would not have worked in Dorian. So we really need to take a good look. Look at a GIS map of our country. We know we are low-lying all around, and we need to position ourselves. And to our Bahamian people, there's a lot of complaint about the government debt and et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of things happen because we take for granted our own personal responsibilities. And then we create a system that is going to bog our government down more and more all the time each year. During Dorian, 85% of the homes in Abaco had no insurances. 85% of the homes. And this wasn't during a time when there was such great financial disruption as you saw within COVID. It was basically reasonable times. We all need to know that as citizens, just as in crime fighting, we have a first duty of care to protect ourselves. It is just like you being on an airline with your child sitting next to you, and they say, in the time of distress, you put the mask on yourself first. The same way we have a duty of care to our own homes and our own lives, to obey warnings, to understand where we are geographically. Men, pay attention to your houses and your roofs, and you know hurricane season is coming in. Maybe a little less collect and some more shingle on your house. Prepare your family. Prepare yourselves. And that's something that needs to be stressed across the board, no matter who likes it. Have a plan for your family and your home. It's good to be a hero in the midst of the storm, but it's even better to have a strategic plan. It's even better when you hear a warning of a catastrophe coming with surges over 15 feet to take your family where they can be secured. It grieves me to know that many of the lives that were lost did not have to be, because the warning was given over and over and over again. And I want to thank our Marines, because when others rightfully were fleeing wisely, our Marines was heading ahead of the storm to be in the midst of the storm to carry out their duties. And they may not be perfect in what they and the everyday things, but when it comes time for them to live up to their code, to protect and to serve, I was impressed at how our defense force officers and our police officers handle themselves, and even down to civil servants and other capacities stepped up in those environments. And I agree with Senator Russell, and I expounded by saying, for me, I believe that this year's National Heroes and otherwise, we should be singing greater praises for persons so that we can give a show of example to our young people that this is the kind of altruism that we expect. I remember during hurricane time in Fox Hill, would you believe that people were calling the police because in the midst of the hurricane, people were coming and stealing plywood of people's houses? I remember in the midst of the hurricane when it was hitting here that the Shell gas station down west was getting broken into. But you find that these persons rose to the occasion and they show the kind of stuff that we are made of. And I commend them wholeheartedly. And I commend the senators who have presented for the most part for engendering the spirit and the heart and the intent of this bill. No, there are times when we are addressing things. Everything is important to people. But this is very special and sensitive to our people. This is a deliberate attempt to help to ease the burdens financially, psychologically on the minds of people who were afflicted by Dorian. In a sense, this is one of the highest causes for what we are here for. And I refuse to play politics on somebody's grave, or on somebody's pain, or on somebody's anguish. I refuse to cause them to think F&M or PLP in the midst of their suffering. I want them to know that we Bahamians, come together, understand your needs, support your needs, and whatever we can do, we'll do it for you as if it was ourselves. Because when I'm in need, I'm not looking for a yellow flag or a red flag. When I'm in need, I want a friend. I want a friend, a real friend. So with that, Madam President, I support this bill. I commend the government, and I await the AG's response to the questions.
Thank you, Senator Ruben Raming, for your contribution. As many? Would you recognize Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder?
Thank you, Madam President. I stand on the wrap-up. And I want to thank colleagues around the table for their focused contribution, their what appears to be almost unanimous support for the bill and the amendment, and the approach and support of the government who is trying to assist those who have had the heart-wrenching experience of losing loved ones and not knowing their whereabouts in a natural disaster. Senator Henfield raised, I think, only really one question that I'll respond to about facilitating the process. I think you used the word archaic process. And speaking about the registrar and trying to get one and move on that one, we hope in the fall when we come back to have the necessary amendments to the respective pieces of legislation to be able to roll that program out immediately. We're meeting with the registrar on her return. She's out of country to be able to go through the amendments and have that happen. So that is moving fast forward. You know, when I so said, so done on those things. With respect to my good friend, Senator Ellis, and on the side, she's been, you said I should teach. She's been trying to take me to school as well. But, you know, I would make the point that this is a amendment to the Evidence Act. And the point of this amendment to the Evidence Act is to ensure that and she rightfully spoke about what a legal presumption means when determined by the court. And that's exactly right. And what we are looking to do is to expedite and facilitate the evidence that would prove somebody otherwise dead to be able to more speedily process these applications and these determinations of death. And that's what we're trying to do. I understand that the senator would advocate for a bill that covers presumption of death, and that's a fair advocacy on her part. And other countries do have a complete bill. We approach it in a matter of evidence. But certainly to her recommendation, I would be happy to look at the legislation she points out to see if it justifies a complete bill to handle certain matters of presumption of death. My good friend, Senator Ramming, spoke on a number of matters with passion. The ones that he spoke to on the questions he asked of myself, again, have to do with process and the judicial process per se. And then the ability to facilitate and help those who find themselves in this situation, one, through the presumption and determination of death, but even further than that, I think your point is to let's take it further. Once you're presumed dead, there are other steps and matters to resolving a dispute, an estate or otherwise. And those are good points. On the question with respect to whether we can ensure that this doesn't get clogged in the judicial system when these determinations start being made and families start looking to have their death certificates issued on an evidentiary presumption that their loved one is dead. Certainly we will speak to the Chief Justice. I don't see why we couldn't have a court designated as in this instance, because the fact of the matter is, it's an event of peril, and we know when there's an event of peril, and we have determined that this event is an event of peril, and you only have to determine that one time. Hurricane Dorian is an event of peril. Therefore, Justice, please entertain these determinations on an expedited fashion. And that happens all the time, and we can ensure and speak to the incoming Chief Justice, who I would like to congratulate on my feet, to establish that mechanism, and that's great. With respect to the legal support aspect, we are working expeditiously, and I think I announced this in maybe my budget contribution regarding our new community legal aid program launched at the Eugene DePuch Law School, of which that will encompass both a virtual platform to provide advice and consultation to those who, especially the indigent, who need that help, but also a mobile service to bring the lawyers to the people. And you mentioned probate, and actually probate is at the top of the list where we think we can provide, very thorough advice, both virtually and mobile, to assist people and Bahamians in processing these applications. And certainly the virtual platform, I've tested it. I was at the pilot, is a great platform. And to the extent that we can utilize that in the islands, for example, we're talking about in the islands here, we think that that's a great platform to do that. So we are focused on providing that assistance. And I will actually communicate that to the legal aid clinic, that once we advance this and this piece of legislation, we help facilitate that they should have a concerted program to address and help persons who are affected in these events of peril. So you can have a focused group of attorneys. I know my good friend, Mr. Henfield, will volunteer his time. I know my good friend, Senator Ellis, looks to volunteer her time as part of the legal aid initiative. And everybody on our side who are attorneys, I will insist that they donate their time. Senator Griffin, listen, we have a lot of lawyers, so we're going to utilize them to help those that need this assistance. And so we do want to wrap those programs that we're launching to help in this instance in the events of peril. And like I said, events of peril are going to be easily identified because a court will rule this is an event of peril. And then you go from there. So in that regard, I think this is a good good positive step especially for the residents of Abaco and Grand Bahama, to relieve, to the extent it can be relief, to bring closure to circumstances of which they have experienced. And we will do everything in our power to move swiftly, concertedly, with the necessary discipline to cause this to be facilitated, but also all relief to Bahamians that need it to be facilitated. So those few words on the wrap up, I so move.
Thank you, Senator. The Honorable Ryan Pinder. As many. It has been moved and second that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril.
For the second reading of bills.
Madam President, at this time, I would like to, we have two other bills for second reading before we go to the summer recess. That is the Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment Bill and the Carbon Trading Bill, which we intend to debate on Monday, the 25th of July, 2022. And so I would move that the business of the Senate do suspend until Monday, the 25th of July, 2022 at 10 a.m. Second.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we just yeah. Is there a seconder? It has been moved that the business of the Senate is hereby suspended until the 25th of July, 2022. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The business of the House is suspended until the 20th of July, 2022 at 10 a.m.